Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got a mini unboxing and a little bit of a ramble. I'm still on this high, this mountaintop experience, to be honest with you, from that Russian Adam interview. I still think that's the most important thing I've ever done or said on my channel. Hearing him speak in, such a comfortable way and open and sharing with us just really meant the world to me. So I'm not going to do any big videos today. Maybe tomorrow I'll get back to this year in perfume, or this is not a top 10. We'll see how I feel tomorrow. But I do want to talk about a fragrance that meant a lot in my journey. It's a very controversial fragrance because the people who love it don't just love it, they are mad about it. And I used to be in the category of someone who was a huge proponent of this scent, and I still really like it and I enjoy it, but I'm not as raving of a fan as I was earlier, a decade ago, let's say, when I found the scent. My first bottle of this was a 2012 bottle, and like an idiot, I threw it away. I should have kept it. And, even when I was throwing it away, there was something in the back of my mind going, why are you throwing this away? But I was thinking, I don't need it. What am I going to do? Sell it on eBay for 10, 20 bucks? Then I chunked the bottle with the box. But I have 4 of these bottles. And if you go watch my Creed family portrait, I have kind of shown them off to you guys at different times. And you will notice that they're all 2017 and before. I don't have any of the new bottles, but I do have a new flacon of Creed Aventus, which we're going to talk about later on. This is a 2014 bottle, and so this is not going to be a review, but this is just going to be kind of me sharing my thoughts, because it was my scent of the day. I'll do a fresh spray for you guys. For those of you that haven't seen the Creed atomizer in its full glory, I mean, look at this. It's absolutely amazing. That is one thing that they got right. These old atomizers are the bomb. And so the caps, on the other hand, are for a $500 bottle of fragrance, are completely pathetic. But it is what it is. You're not buying it for the cap. So before I want to talk about Aventus, because it was my scent of the day, I went to the office today, and I figured, you know what, I'll be nice to my fellow office goers, and I'll wear a popular niche fragrance that's kind of friendly, right? Everyone loves Aventus when I wear it to the office, but my interest in Aventus as my journey has gone on has kind of continued to wane, and this was maybe, even though this is a 2014 bottle, this wearing may be one of the more disappointed wearings that I had with the fragrance. And it's because I've been wearing all kind of other crazy stuff, but we'll get to that later on. I want to do an unboxing. I already kind of unboxed it, but I want to show you guys. I got a mini of a fragrance I've been kind of eyeing for a long time. And I got a good deal, and he sent it to me in this. I've never had that happen before. I opened it up and went, what in the world is this? Oh yeah, it was the fragrance. So the fragrance that we're talking about is a fragrance called Gatsby. Are you guys familiar with this perfume? It's from the 80s. It's from my favorite time period. And I'm just going to pull up the notes so I can talk to you about it. It's a blind buy, but it's something I've been watching for a long time. Full bottles can be had, I guess, for 80, 90, 100, 120, depending on the size, 150 even. I've seen some of the bigger ones. But Gatsby caught my attention because it's supposed to be this sweet, honeyed-like fragrance, which I love honey. Not so much sweet fragrances, but this is 80s sweet we're talking about. So it's supposed to be this, and it's sweetened by honey, which I absolutely love. So I had to give it a try. Maybe I'll regret not going for the bigger bottle, but, for 5 ml or whatever this is enough juice for me to, give it a full wear and do a first impression for you guys. It's from a house called Pacoma, Pacoma, which I don't think I have anything else from that house in my collection at all. So I think this is the only one. So if this is a love, then maybe I will get a bigger bottle at some point in time. But I just wanted to let you guys know this did arrive today. And I kind of took the liberty of unboxing it. It arrived in the pill pack, in the pill bottle from Costco, by the way. But anyways, if you guys have any experience with Gatsby, do let me know. I hear there's even supposed to be a little bit of a, almost like this liqueured-like note. The honey almost turns like this liqueured honey. And so, interesting fragrance. And so we'll get into that at another video. I'll do an early impression for you guys. But let's talk about the scent of my scent of the day today. Let's talk a little bit about Creed Aventus. And so Aventus came out in 2010. And originally the perfumer was listed, of course, as Irwin and Olivier Creed, which they since had to kind of backtrack on some of their perfume history because this book came out called The Ghost Perfumer. And as you can see, the front of the bottle on the front looks like it's an Aventus bottle, although it doesn't say Aventus, but that's the idea that it's giving. I love the presentation of the book. And so far, I love the book. I've been busy with my own personal class studies, and so I haven't had a chance to read through it as much or as far as I want. But I will tell you that most people who, well, first of all, most people who love Aventus buy into the Creed history, which a lot of it is almost debunked in this book, and very solidly, with documents, resources, all kind of stuff. And then finding out that, you know, Creed was basically using other world-famous perfumers, not just some nobody perfumer, but one of the greatest perfumers of all time in how can I forget the most famous perfumer's name? What is going on with me? In Pierre Bourdon. And so in Pierre Bourdon, they basically had someone, and they go into it in the book, they had someone who, you know, he had personal issues with his father and all kind of stuff, and Olivier Creed came in as this James Bond figure, this larger than life, you know, someone that Pierre Bourdon almost like looked up to. And some of the formulas he gave to him for nothing, for free, for the price of, you know, 1 or 2 custom tailored Creed suits, which basically are worthless. They mean nothing. But, you know, I guess it's cool to say you have a Creed suit, but, you know, does he really need a Creed suit? Probably not. He could go to Men's Warehouse or wherever good store he has in Italy or France, or I forgot where he lives. It's been a long day. As you can see, I'm in my work attire. But Pierre Bourdon turned out to perfume many of the Creed classics, okay? He did Millésime Impériale, which is a take on his master's creation, which his master was Edmund Rudnitska, the master perfumer, who ended up teaching Pierre Bourdon, and Pierre Bourdon himself turned into a master perfumer. And then Pierre Bourdon took that knowledge, and, you know, he made things like Green Irish Tweed. He made things like Millésime Impériale, which was modeled after Ocean Rain, which was created by Edmund Rudnitska, which I actually have a bottle coming on the way, so I'm very excited to smell that. And he made a couple perfumes later on in his career with some very interesting pineapple notes. So if you actually look up Pierre Bourdon's fragrance tree and you go in chronological order, you'll notice that between the years of the late 90s and then the, you know, until about 2005 or 6 when he retired, or whatever the official date was, you'll notice there were some fragrances that used a very interesting pineapple note, one of which is Canali for Men, which came out in 2008, which came out 2 years before the great Aventus. And he also used a pineapple note in a discontinued Gianfranco Ferré fragrance. and that was called Fere for Men. And he also used a pineapple note in Full Choke by Small Toe. That's the one that has the bottle that, look up Full Choke and you'll get the idea. And that bottle is exactly what you think it is. So he was playing with pineapple as a note in the entire decade or so before Creed's Aventus came out. And the reason that's important is that Pierre Bourdon himself had a couple students. One of them was now one of my favorite modern perfumers, Julien Rasquinet, who made fragrances that I absolutely adore. Like, for example, he did The Moon. He did Creed's own Royal Oud. And Pierre Bourdon also had a second pupil, a second disciple, and that person's name was Jean-Christophe Hérault. And Jean-Christophe Hérault is the one that officially perfumed Aventus. So that's a brief history on Aventus. Now, if you've been following my brand, if you've been following my channel, again, long day, you know that even though you see all these niche fragrances on my shelves, my love, my true, what I feel most comfortable in. When I throw on a fragrance, the thing that I love wearing the most is vintage. There's something about a vintage fragrance that just does it for me, whether it's a vintage Guerlain, whether it's a vintage Chanel, whatever it is. I love vintage fragrances. Hermès Bel Ami is my fragrance I put at the top of my top 100 from the 80s. Leonard Pour Homme, those kind of fragrances. Van Cleef and Arpels, Pour Homme, those are my, what I feel most comfortable in, most happy in. But in order to get to that point in my journey, I had to go here. Okay, I had to go through the niche world. And I've told you guys many a times before that when I first started, I made a mistake. And it's a mistake that I think a lot of people who are in the fragrance game could or potentially have or continue to make. And that's that they associate price with quality. So they think if you're paying $500 for a perfume, you're getting the absolute best thing perfume can offer you. You're getting the best ingredients, you're getting the best juice, on and on and on, right? And that is not always the case. Sometimes a $20 fragrance, because of the perfumer's history, experience in creating fragrances, is better than a $500 fragrance, especially some of the recent stuff that houses like this have put out. I will tell you that with houses like Creed, I am avoiding all of their new offerings. Creed was purchased by BlackRock a few years ago, and BlackRock is rumored to have paid almost $1 billion for Creed. Okay, now, the story of how Olivier Creed turned a bit of a fantasy around his family's name, which they were like glove makers and haberdashery shop owners and stuff like that, into a $1 billion company. You should read the book and get it. I would highly encourage you to do so, even if you think that you know the story because you heard Gabe Oppenheim on streams, which he is amazing, by the way. Hearing him talk, he can go. I mean, he can just turn it on and go. But there's more to the book, that there's details that are very important that, he hasn't revealed or talked about. So, needless to say, this is where I started kind of my fragrance journey. In the old days, obviously, I had old stuff. I had, Nautica in the 90s and CK1 and all the normal stuff that, growing up in my age group may have had as young kids. But when I discovered, Creed, Aventus in 2012, that's when my interest in perfumery really blossomed. And what I did is I went and bought all the Creeds. I just went and started buying Creeds. I thought, oh, wow, I found the perfect brand. I also, one thing before I really got heavy into Creed, I bought a couple designers like M7, Oud Absolu, stuff like that. And then Amouage. It was Creed and Amouage. Those two a decade ago. A decade ago is when my fragrance journey really, the volume started to turn up for me. And I thought, Creed and Amouage, two high-end companies, I'm wearing the best of the best of the best, which we could argue in that point all day. Needless to say, when I smelled this fragrance when I was a decade younger, it smelled and made me feel much different than when I smell it today. So let's talk a little bit about the scent, because now that it's 15 minutes into the video of me rambling, let's talk about the scent itself. And you should know that I have had 5 bottles all in 4 ounce of this. It was almost a little bit of a signature scent for me for a little bit there. And I had an entire flacon, some of which I pawned off to friends, and some of which I just drenched myself in to get it over with, because this is a 2018 flacon, and this was a shadow of its former self. Yes, a shadow of its former self. I feel like it was reformulated, watered down, whatever it may be, whatever word that you would like to use. To my nose, my opinion was this is not what it should have been. And just to show you the quality of Creed, there you go. There's the little piece that goes on top. They can't even have it stay on, right? It's just this tiny little bit of glue and bam, it's off. And that's a great representation of the scent itself, because they began to live off of the royalties that Aventus started to give to them. And they took advantage of that. Now, somebody who I trust, and you may or may not follow, this person. He does a lot of writing on blogs like Base Notes and stuff like that. But he basically thinks that Creed purposely plays with the ingredients every batch. So they turn this up a little bit more. They turn the birch up a little bit more so it's a little more smoky. They turn the pineapple up a little bit more so it's a little bit more fruity, to give the impression that, oh, you're smelling batch variations, that it's not accidental, it's not quality control. It is something that they do on purpose to try to get people to think that they're buying a product that's so natural and so fresh that it basically is on the same level of like Dom Perignon. Certain years of Dom, if the grapes aren't good, they just don't make the champagne, right? That's the vibe Creed was trying to give by playing with the ingredients batch to batch. Now, this person thinks it's intentional and not on purpose, but that's just an interesting opinion I thought I would share with you guys. So let's talk about the scent, keeping in mind that I have massive amounts of experience with Creed Aventus. I have huge amounts of experience of it because I ran through an entire 2012 bottle. This is a 2014, which, as you can see, is almost tapped. I have a 2015, 16, and 17, so I have 3 bottles left. And once they're done, that's it. No more Creed Aventus for me, because I will not buy the new stuff. It'll just be a memory. Now, when you first spray this scent, one thing that you should know is that the ingredient list of the old Creed Aventus, so I wish I had snapshots of the Creed website from 2012 when I bought my first bottle, or even 2014, 15, I think it was the same up until 6, 7, 8 years ago, is all of the ingredients used to be the top ingredients that you can buy. And that's basically what made Creed Creed. Olivier Creed used to get laughed at by the other perfumers or by the other insiders, because while other companies were trying to cut costs, they were reformulating, cutting costs, he basically would take a formula from Pierre Bourdon, or whoever he got it from, and he would just use the best ingredients money can buy. So he would put in the real ambergris. He would use the high-quality Mysore sandalwood when you could still do that in the 80s and 90s. He would use the Bulgarian rose, the Moroccan jasmine, the Indonesian patchouli, the Calabrian bergamot. It was supposed to be the best of the best ingredients. And it feels like that the ingredient quality began to take a dive as a focus on profit really started to rise with the House of Creed, right? So when you first spray this scent, what makes this scent what makes it perfect for the role that it took in society is that this is basically a fruity Shifra, okay? There are other fruity Shifras floating around that I absolutely love. You could call Mitsuko. You could call Mitsuko a fruity Shifra. Let's see if I've got a bottle right here. I do. This is the Eau de Parfum. I have the Eau de Toilette on the way. This is basically a fruity Shifra. This has peach in it. And Aventus had used pineapple, but it uses a Shifra structure. So it has the bergamot, and it has the labdanum, the oak moss. The classic Shifra structure is there. There's usually patchouli in a Shifra. There's patchouli in Creed's Aventus. And they paired that pineapple with blackcurrant and apple. So when you first spray, you're hit with this citrus, bergamot citrus, this Calabrian bergamot citrus, which is very pleasant. And you're hit with this general fruitiness, but it's contrasted with the smoky birch. And there's a little bit of something brewing underneath, a little bit of that vintage old school masculine underneath it all. It's a Shifra, right? And that underneath, that underneath masculine, almost like brewing in a cauldron down below, is the oak moss, and you get a little bit of this ambergris accord, which is probably, some synthetic ambroxan, but I don't know. Maybe Creed does still put a tiny pinch of real ambergris in there. Maybe they were doing that in 2014. I doubt they're doing it anymore because of how expensive real ambergris is. But you get this beautiful contrast, and when I was earlier in my journey, this was like the most amazing thing to me. It was like the best smell you could ever imagine because I could wear it out. People loved it. If you're big on compliments, this really does give you attention compliments, which I don't care about anymore. But if you are big on compliments, this is one of the reasons why Aventus kind of took off, is it got known, as a, something that was attractive to the ladies, right? The ladies loved it on men. And it uses that classical Shifra structure. But what you get is you get that fruitiness in the top, and then they come behind and they do a trick that Pierre Bourdon mastered in Kouros. So Kouros is a contrast of freshness and dirty. It's fresh and dirty. And it blends those two together. The dirtiness is from Civet. The fresh accord, Pierre Bourdon almost ended up mastering that fresh accord later on in his career when he did Green Irish Tweed, Cool Water, all that good stuff, right? He became like creating a new fresh accord, but he still had a brilliant fresh accord in Kouros. And this does something very similar. It takes that very pleasant, unique fruitiness, and now when people think about pineapple, they instantly think about Creed Aventus, this smoky pineapple. But it was around for, lots of fragrances use pineapple. Excuse me. There's pineapple in this. This is a vintage bottle of Lapidus Porum. This is from 1987. I love this fragrance. I think I like this even more than Aventus. This is like the 80s Aventus, if you will. It's heavier on all the things I love. Honey, tobacco. I mean, this has everything. This has everything that I love in an 80s format. Powerhouse. And so this has been so successful that it's like synonymous with pineapple now, but it takes it and it contrasts it with smoky birch. So birch tar is used in things like Russian leather. So Russian leather is a type of leather fragrance. Excuse me while I get this. Russian leather is a type of leather fragrance that, and I have loads of Russian leathers. It's one of my favorite types of leathers. This is Great Britain. That's a Russian leather. And it uses birch. Cuir de Russie by Chanel is probably the best Russian leather money can buy. Although Roja's Great Britain might have a thing or two to say about that. But those two are definitely the best on the market for me. And I got this for such a steal. I got this for like 10 bucks. This is a fantastic Russian leather iteration. And I love leather fragrances. And it takes that smoky birch, right? Birch adds this smoke to a composition. And it blends it with a little bit of florals, and you get that patchouli so that there's some depth to the fragrance. And then you get that oak moss, the ambergris, and then to soften everything up, a little bit of vanilla underneath. But there's that contrast between the smoky birch and the fruity top. And that fruity top, even when it goes away, it's almost like the pyramid just kind of collapses in on itself. So the top notes, which are fruity, and then the, oak moss and all that good stuff, the ambergris I was telling you about, the birch, the patchouli, it's like it just collapses in on itself and creates this beautiful masculine Shifra fragrance. It's a Shifra, which basically is a reference to an island in Cyprus, and the reason that Coty's Shifra originally was named Shifra is because rumor has it that Aphrodite from old mythology is from Cyprus, and she used to sleep on a bed of moss. That was the legend, and Aphrodite could seduce anybody, right? She was the goddess of love. And she used to sleep on a bed of moss, right? And so this has that masculine oak moss accord underneath. And this is one of the big reasons why it is my belief that reformulation hit this fragrance so hard. Is in 2010, when this came out, they were able to use much higher doses of oak moss than as the years progressed. IFRA started to really clamp down on the oak moss accord. I'm not 100% sure when, but I think it had been 2 or 3 years after Aventus really came out and made its debut. Because I have some bottles from 2000 and even as late as 2017. Maybe they spent the money back then to molecularly remove the oak moss and use the higher quality ingredients. Maybe they had the money to be able to do that, right? Or not just the money, but the will and the love of perfumery to, make that call. And then I think eventually they just decided, forget it. We'll just remove the oak moss and use other things to try to mimic an oak moss accord. I think they amped up the patchouli a little bit. This is what they did in the 2017, but this is just super weak. I was so angry about this 2018 batch that I vowed never to buy another new Creed until they make this right. That's my pledge to Creed, is I will never, and you've seen all the Creeds that I have. That right there, it just takes one time for a company to take advantage of your trust, and that's it. It's over. It's like what with Bois 1920 did to Rich Mitch when he bought a sealed EDT version of the of Real Patchouli, and when he opened the sealed box, it was an EDP bottle inside. That company took advantage of his trust, right? So he said, I'm never dealing with this company again. They wouldn't make it right. Creed kind of did me the same way. And so even though I will buy old Creeds, I've purchased older Creeds since then. Like I bought this from Anuj. This is an old bottle of Venezia, and you can see the old Creed packaging before they made the boxes a certain way. And I mean, look at that. It's amazing. So I will buy old Creeds because I know the old Creeds still were Creed. Creed was about the highest quality ingredients, irregardless of price, and they charged a high amount for that. Now, their prices have steadily increased as the years went on, but that was due to the success of Aventus. It became almost like a phenomenon. Base Notes had to create its own little forum where Aventus heads could argue about different batch codes to segregate them from the rest of the website. You know, it got that crazy. And, you know, there was a bottle, an original 2010 bottle that 3 years ago sold for $1,000. And I thought they're insane. Who in the world would pay $1,000 for a bottle of Aventus? Now a sealed 2010 bottle, well, none of them are sealed, but new unsprayed, let's call it. Creeds don't come sealed. They come just like this. There's no cellophane around them. Now a new 2010 bottle, we saw one a few months back, and the person on eBay wanted something like $50,000. So the whole culture, the whole Aventus culture just kind of blew up, and it made Creed's valuation in sales expand to such a huge amount that Olivia Creed was able to sell the company. Needless to say, throughout this little history lesson I'm trying to go through, and probably not doing the best job, changes in the formulations were made for me, to my nose, and not for the better. And so that's why I have a love-hate relationship with Aventus. I love it for what it did for me, how it set me on the path that I'm on now. I never would have been able to discover, you know, beautiful fragrances like Mitsuko, which I have the Eau de Toilette coming, by the way. This is the Eau de Parfum. I have the Eau de Toilette coming. I never would have been able to discover beautiful vintage fragrances like Lapidus Pour Homme. You know, that kind of stuff. I never would have discovered the older Creeds. But I also have a little bit of a hate relationship with Aventus because of what it turned into. And it basically turned into a symbol of a company that almost took advantage of the entire perfume world. And according to the book, Olivia Creed took advantage by creating a fake history, saying this fragrance right here actually is a great example of that. If you go to Fragrantica and look up Venezia, the story of Venezia is that, let's see if they still have it up. They do still have it up. From the Creed's website, Creed created Venezia for the Queen of Spain, who happened to be the great niece of Marie Antoinette of France. After assuming the throne, the Spanish queen wished to make a style statement like her French relative. She commissioned from Creed a fragrance that was rich, sensual, and mysterious, with undertones of Spanish woods and rich vanilla, the unforgettable Venezia. And they claim that Venezia came out in 1899. Okay? Now, a lot of this has been debunked, right? But they took advantage of the whole, lavish fragrance culture. Fragrances were all about, you know, lavish, selling a story. Creed took advantage of that. And then once they actually got to where they got, they took advantage of our trust again by selling a fragrance in the same bottle, but that to me smells like a shell of its former self, literally. 2018 batch versus the 2014 batch that I have here almost smell like completely different fragrances. And the last point on Creed's Aventus is they developed a new type of musk for Creed Aventus. And this is why it's been so hard for cologne houses to really copy Aventus properly, and it took them so long. I think they're getting there. You know, Creed Aventus is the most cloned fragrance ever, by the way. It has the most clones. It's more cloned than Baccarat Rouge 540. It's more cloned than, I mean, anything you can think of. This is one of the most cloned perfumes. So it, you know, it created this this cultural icon, but they created this new kind of musk. Probably a perfumer will know Someone like Euro Rose will probably know, our in-house perfumer of Channel Ramsey. And so it was this new musk mixed with this new, creation, and the fragrance took off. And I think it's a good fragrance. Even now, even after smelling thousands of fragrances in the last decade, I still think this is a good fragrance. But as my experience with fragrances continue, my interest in wearing something like Aventus has just continued to decline over the years, especially as its popularity has continued to rise. So today, as an example, one of the guys I work with has been wanting to smell it forever. So I took decant and I sprayed it for him. And he's like, wow, this is amazing. I love it. And that's what Creed Aventus does so well, is it mixed the ability for somebody who, somebody who isn't a frag head, right? Someone who maybe likes fragrances but isn't obsessed about fragrances to smell that and go, wow, that's nice. I love it. But it also was able to keep the attention of somebody who is a little bit more into fragrances. And it walked that line, right? It wasn't so niche that it was unwearable. It wasn't, Hindi oud or something. It was very wearable to Western noses. But on the other hand, it was at least interesting, right? And that's kind of the blend that Aventus walked, and it created this phenomenon. Now, for somebody who is experienced with fragrances, you may smell this and you may not be as impressed, and you may not understand what the hype is all about. Now, by now, I'm sure everyone has smelled Aventus or some sort of clone of Aventus. The DNA, see, the thing about a perfume's DNA is if you go back a decade or 12 years ago, coming out with something completely new, your nose may have never smelled anything like this. It may have never smelled the, patented musk Creed was talking about. It may not have smelled this type of DNA. Now that there's clone houses from, all over the place. Armaf, L'Aventure has its own, so many different clones. Mont Blanc cloned Aventus in one way. So there's so much out there now that you may not be as impressed. You may not love Creed Aventus in the way that somebody who has never smelled anything like this before would love it. So just a quick ramble, 37 minutes in, on Aventus. I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts with you because as someone who loves vintage and as someone who goes for specific formulas, I love hunting down certain distributors and certain batch codes, and not batch codes on Aventus, but certain years that, a perfume was distributed under this distributor versus another. That's kind of my thing. I'm big on reformulations. And Aventus is one of the worst offenders when it comes to that. But if you're going to try to buy a bottle of Aventus, I would say try to get a 2017 or earlier. Don't buy anything 2018 or after, is my opinion, because that's when I feel like the scent really started to change, almost to the point where it's undiscernible as an expensive niche fragrance. I wish I would have still had some of this where I could send it to people to test that this is truly what Creed was selling for $500 a bottle, or whatever that flacon was, $800 a flacon. Because, the reformulation just bit Aventus so hard to me. Now, if you've never smelled it, if you never experienced some of these older bottles, you might not understand what all the hype was about. You might smell Aventus and think, oh, that's it? It's okay. But some of these older bottles were great. And that's the dichotomy I have in my mind with Aventus. Wearing it today, I still love it to the point where it brings back all the memories of all the times that I wore it before and all that good stuff. But then on the other hand, there are other things that I want to wear. I might have been happier wearing this today, this random Russian leather fragrance. This is more me now than Aventus is. And so probably a lot of the people who watch my channel aren't as interested in Aventus, but since I had it on as my scent of the day, I figured I'd just do a quick talk about it. It doesn't even need to be reviewed. It's been reviewed a million times. You kind of have an idea of what the breakdown turns into. If you've never smelled it, it's worth the smell. It's worth checking it out. Don't buy so much into the story that, it's Emperor Napoleon and, it's inspired by his dramatic life and all this stuff. I mean, there's a ton of other fragrances inspired by Napoleon. Don't buy so much into the Creed mystique and aura and house history. Don't believe they were making this for the Queen of Spain in 1899. But if you find a Creed fragrance that you like, try to get one of the older versions. That's my recommendation as a vintage lover. The older versions of Creed are the ones that still had they were still doing it somewhat for the love of perfumery. It wasn't all about the money back then. Now it almost feels like Black Rock turned it into being all about the money. And when all you care about is money, it's hard to, make an impression on someone who all they care about is the juice. When all I care about is the juice and all they care about is money, those two worlds will never come together. You have to have a company that cares about the juice that they're putting in bottles. If it's only about sales, they're in trouble. And I think Black Rock saved Olivier Creed in a sense, because Creed was already kind of doing this, and they came in and bought right here, and then this happened. And now they're here going, how do we fix this? So now Black Rock is in a situation where if you read their modern book on Creed, so after new management took over Creed, Black Rock put out a book, or Creed put out a book, but with Black Rock's management, of course, that says, the beginning of the modern age of our story begins around the year of 1960 something, 1962 or whatever, whenever Olivier Creed really started to get it off the ground, 1968 or whatever it was. So basically they're saying, without saying it, they're saying all of the previous claims, we're not going to talk about that because the modern version of our company Creed begins here in 1968 or whatever the year was. I don't know, but it was sometime in the 60s. So they're kind of in this position where they can't admit everything was built on a lie because people are still spending $500 a bottle, right? But they're also trying to save money and reformulate and stuff like that. And some of the recent Creed releases that I've smelled, like Viking Cologne, that was one of the worst things I've ever smelled in my life. Forget niche or designer. That fragrance in and of itself is trash. The original Viking, I actually did like. I have a big 500 ml flacon of that. But Viking Cologne, to me, some of the stuff that they've released, even Aventus Cologne is not good. So as a house, I would say Creed's in trouble. I would say they are in big trouble because the people who are big into fragrances are no longer willing to spend the big coin when they could just go out and get, vintage perfumes or something better to hunt down. So that's kind of the situation where Creed is at. I think they find themselves in this crossroads where their prices have continued to go up to the point where people are just like, you know what, I'm going to tap the brakes. Before I go spend $500 on a bottle of Creed, I'm going to shop around. And then when you combine that with the fact that they pop up on discounters, so if you just wait, you'll see these on discounters instantly for half price. It almost makes you feel like you're a fool for paying full price, which I do have Creed bottles I paid full price for. My bottle of Millésime 1849 in the green bottle. I don't think I have it up here. I think it's under lock and key. But my bottle of Millésime 1849, I paid full retail for that. Now that one's discontinued and fetching very high prices now. But, I mean, imagine paying $500 at retail for this and then turning around and seeing it on a discounter for $220. you know, it kind of makes you question why you're dealing with this brand. So just a ramble, maybe not so much of a quick ramble, but just a ramble on Aventus, my thoughts on the House of Creed. If you're a fragrance lover, the Ghost Perfumer is fantastic. Some of the things he goes into, like how, you know, perfumers are bonused based on using specific captive molecules that, you know, only the house that signs them to the contract can use. That kind of stuff is all very interesting. And so if you want to kind of get a behind the scenes inside look about a very amazing story, I would highly recommend the Ghost Perfumer. Let me know what you think of Aventus. Obviously, I still wear it from time to time. It was my scent of the day today. But I'm starting to fall out of love with it. I'm starting to love stuff like this much more. You know, I would say I love something like Mitsuko, or even there's a new bottle that I just got of Le Bleu that I'm very excited to wear. I might wear this to bed tonight. This is the kind of stuff that I'm really starting to get into. So anyways, let me know what your thoughts are. And if you have any experience with the unboxing from Gatsby, let me know as well. And tomorrow we'll get back on track with some normal videos. And you know, check out that Russian Adam interview if you haven't. I think it's a very important interview. He goes into many other things other than just himself and his life and stuff like that. He was very open. We talked about a lot of topics. So that interview I'm very, very blessed that he chose me to be able to give him that interview. So thanks for watching, guys. Do leave a like and a comment, and subscribe if you have a chance, but obviously you don't have to. I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire, but it does, I think, help with the eyeballs. It helps with the algorithm. It helps people kind of finding me. That's what I always say I want. I want people in our tribe to find us. I want more people that are kind of floating around that don't know about our little group to be able to find us and join and contribute. So cheers, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Love reading your comments. Love seeing your faces down below. And see you again tomorrow with another video. Bye now.